Welcome to Care Vision's Professional Talk, the discussion show that brings you vital insights from leading voices in social care, education, health, and youth development. I'm Humphrey Hawksley, and I speak to trailblazers, researchers, and practitioners, and for all of those interested in how we care within our society, come join us. Whether you're a practitioner, educator, family member, or curious learner, join us to think, reflect, and grow new ideas. Hello, I'm Humphrey Hawksley, and this is Care Vision's Professional Talk. And my guest is Britain's first Professor in Social Pedagogy. This is a discipline that integrates care, education, upbringing, essentially breaking down the silos and the pigeonholes and addressing the whole of a child's life. Social pedagogy is well established in Europe and elsewhere, but not in the United Kingdom. Why is that? To find out, welcome Dr. Claire Cameron to Care Vision's Professional Talk.
Thank you, Humphrey. Thank you so much. Great to be here with you and great to be part of the Care Vision's professional enterprise, as it were.
Thanks so much for being with us. Can we ground our discussion to begin with and tell us what exactly is social pedagogy?
See, exactly is a problem because social pedagogy has been interpreted in many ways in different countries at different time periods across the world. It's an evolving discipline. But at essence, what it's trying to do is theorize what is happening for a child outside home and school. Originally, it was developed in the 1844. Someone called Major in Germany articulated it as the theory of everything that happens outside home and school. So it's about everyday life, in a sense. It's about living together. It's about the relationship between individual and society. It's about, as it has evolved, it's about trying to introduce an educative approach to social problems.
I want to return to this later on, but just is it better or is it more advanced than what we are doing in the United Kingdom at the moment?
That's also a tricky question because it depends what you're comparing it with.
Let's compare it to Europe.
That comparison is different in different countries. And so some of the research that we've done in the past, for example, we looked at residential care in England, Germany, and Denmark in the mid-2000s. And we could see that the outcomes were better for children who were growing up in residential care in Denmark and Germany than they were in England.
And could you put your finger on exactly why that was, or was that?
So in the things that we looked at, which were around the management style, the ethos of the place, the workforce qualifications and the commitment to work, all of that kind of practice at the everyday level, we found that it was the staff characteristics that were making most difference.
Okay.
So the staff characteristics were that they were training, graduate level training in social pedagogy, very often, some psychologists in there as well, but they were very often social pedagogue trained. And the level of training was at a bachelor degree level, which we don't have in this country. And the other aspects that were very important were things like commitment to stay in post, the ethos of the residential care environment was very important. The way in which staff were looked after themselves, the way that they articulated their theories and the practices was also important.
Okay, that is absolutely fascinating, and you pioneered the way by becoming the first professor of this at UCL, University College London. But I want to go back to your beginning too. So how did you get here talking to us about social pedagogy when there are so many different interpretations of it? When you were growing up, did you dream of this career, or did you want to be an acrobat or a pilot or something?
I certainly didn't dream about this career in academia that I've had. But I did know somebody who was a social worker. And when I was at school in Scotland, in a progressive boarding school in Scotland, which very much mixed care and education, I suppose. And the person that I knew was a social worker, and I thought, well, I could do that. I could do that role. I went away to England and did my A-levels. I then went to university. I did sociology and politics and English A-levels. I went to university, studied sociology, politics, psychology. And then I came out. I was at Durham. I wanted to stay living in Durham. It was the mid-'80s. There were not many jobs around for graduates at all. But there was a job at a children's home down the road.
Okay.
So I went and worked in a secure unit called Aycliffe School.
Secure unit meaning that these were very troublesome children.
The children were locked up. They were rapists, arsonists, murderers, all sorts of things that they had done. It was a regional centre, so the children had come from all over the north of England to live there. And they would be there until they became an adult in age, and then they would go to prison, or their sentence would be over or whatever.
So you were very young then?
I was 21.
21. So what did your first day or week there, what was your takeaway from it?
That your fingers wear out turning keys all the time. That was my first sense. That it was because you were locked in, it was very safe. The children were just children. They liked to play games. They liked to chat. The Olympics was on. We were watching a lot of the Olympics on the telly. They would occasionally get to go to the gym. They had a school, on-site school, so there was a schoolroom there. There were some kids who were very troubled. I mean, like self-harming, troubled. And that was quite hard to deal with.
And at this stage, you said earlier on that you knew somebody who was social work and you could do that job. You didn't say it was like a calling that you wanted to do that job. So at this very early stage, in this very interesting but probably quite frightening thing, did you want to stick with it? Did it make you want to do more there?
At the time, I did want to stick with it. I could see that there were quite quickly, I guess, from the secure unit was built on a behavioural model. Basically, they were all about sanctions and rewards for children, and so every day there would be a meeting: who's done this, who's not done this. And after a while, I began to think this didn't sit very well with my higher education understanding of how people work. My psychology training, my sociology training, it just began to feel like it wasn't a good way to do things. So after about 6 months in the secure unit, I then worked in an open unit, and the children were being stopped from doing things that they wanted to do because they hadn't done something else. And I began to feel that this wasn't a great way. So
this was these early years when you were a childcare worker, social worker, and that has sort of founded your core convictions of what good care and child development is? That was your...
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think the experience of being at Corpality, doing A-levels as I did, and then going to studying sociology, politics, psychology, was foundational. And in sort of core beliefs about how human beings operate in relation to each other, about what one needs for nurturance, and what the possibilities and limitations are of a very top-down approach, which is what behavioural theory is.
And is there a particular, you don't have to name names or anything like that, a particular child or family that you dealt with in those years that has actually contributed towards this core approach that you have now developed?
I think after I left that children's home, I went to work in Islington in a children's home there.
Lovely.
Which, so we're now in 1985, 86. And Islington at the time was quite a vibrant place, still is. It was very politically active. There was a lot of anti-racism movement going on. There was a lot of pushback on LGBTQ things. It was a very learning period, I guess, for me. And in the children's home where we worked, we were looking a lot at how can we do things to make children's lives better. Not how do we control them, but how do we give children the most opportunities that they could have for a family life, for an educative life, for a social life. And so we studied hard, really. We reflected on the children that we had in our care. And we thought deeply and in a multidisciplinary way about what we could be doing. I'm not sure that there's one individual, but there were events that happened. Like we went on we took the children on a barge holiday, a group of kids up the, what are they called, Buckinghamshire canals. Mm-hmm. We took the children to Brighton for the day, to the beach. We went on a residential in Norfolk, where incidentally a fire broke out, and we had to interview all the children about what they knew about this fire. And we were all out on a walk when it happened, and we had to be quite hard on the children in a way, because we had to make sure that it wasn't any of them that were responsible for this, because of liability issues and so on. And I think that, that my general experience in that time, it wasn't that long, but in that time was about there are different ways of doing this, and we can work together on issues.
So it was a sense that the system wasn't right and needed to be changed. How would you describe then and now, whether that's changed at all, what do children most need from adults and the systems that care for them?
Well, if you come to me now, I mean, what do I think now about that? Mm-hmm. A framework that I've been working with very recently is what do children think makes them feel well and be well? So a kind of a well-being framework that is quite concrete. And if you look at studies all over the world and with children of lots of different ages, we can see three things that children value. One is to have someone to rely on, a trusting relationship, at least one, preferably more. A second is to have plenty to do, especially outdoors, to have a rich and varied selection of activities to be able to pursue their interests. And the third is to be able to have a say in their lives.
Okay.
And to not feel that they're ignored. That they are being listened to and that people do things on the basis of it. And the more I talk about this and write about this and think about this in relation to various circumstances of children's lives, I think that's a pretty sound framework. In fact, the latest government youth policy to come out has those three dimensions in it, not using those exact words, but it is basically saying we have to make children's lives better.
This is what you just encapsulated very, very well. Thank you for that. What you sense now. Back then, when you were formulating these ideas, was it as succinctly and clear in your mind?
No. There's a long period of struggle before you get to any kind of, analytic thinking about in that way. There was a sense in the 80s, there was a sense that you could do things better for children. You could provide for them. You could take them out on trips. You could, have a personal but not a private conversation with children and their parents about what was the best way of having a life that didn't involve social services in it. And there was more, at that time, there was more money, I suppose, and attention focused on what we now call prevention activities, whether that's sports, leisure, hanging out, youth work, and so on.
Mm-hmm. So this is at what stage did you discover social pedagogy? Was it like a eureka moment? Oh my goodness, there's this thing over in Europe I need to look at, or was it a slow evolving?
Yeah, I mean, in the early 90s, I moved into research. I started working first for Bedford College on a project about young men in Islington and their mental health and activity lives. That was following up a very famous study called The Social Origins of Depression. So their mothers had been interviewed, and then we were interviewing the sons. And then I started working for Thomas Coram Research Unit on a project looking at, quite a different project, looking at the impact of the Children Act 1989 on early childhood care and education, what was then called daycare. And then I carried on working on studies for Thomas Coram Research Unit. And we had two members of staff in the unit who were coordinating European networks. One was around school-age childcare, and one was around early childhood education. And in both those networks, the role of social pedagogue was becoming known about. And then the government, Department for Health, who had research contracts with us, asked us to look at residential care in other countries. This was about 1999. And the significant actor here was a civil servant called Helen Jones. Unfortunately not with us any longer, but she had been on some study tours in European countries. She was a chief social worker in England. She had been a social worker in practice. She'd moved into government, and she was the architect of many innovations in policy at that time. She asked us to go and look at residential care in Europe. And so Pat Petrie and myself and a couple of other people did a small study looking at what was meant by social pedagogy in Belgium, France, Netherlands, Denmark, and Germany. And
then in those countries, that is a phrase that's used, is it? That is the discipline of...
It's the discipline.
And we didn't have it over here in Britain.
We didn't have it, and we don't... it's more emergent now. We didn't have it at that time, but there was a group of people, and I'm going to forget his name now, but there was a group of people looking at radical sort of boarding school education stroke residential care who had come across social pedagogy. So there was a couple of roundtable discussions about it, but nothing systematic.
But when you've done the research, you've encapsulated what it is. When you go and you come back to Britain and you talk to whoever runs these systems, what are you coming up against that's stopping it happening?
Well, we've got established professions. So we have social work, we have residential care. And of course, what's important is that social pedagogy in other countries is it's the occupation, the theory, the training framework for a wide range of occupations. So it's not just residential care. It's also in early childhood education. It's youth work. It's work with older people in residential care. It's what we would call social care. It's, as I said at the beginning, it's everything that happens outside family and school, in a sense. So in Denmark, the social pedagogue works with people from 0 to 100.
Oh, okay.
In all kinds of settings, whether it's...
So is this a cultural element or a societal element, would you say? Is that the European way of thinking and a British way of thinking?
There is a humanitarian underpinning and a kind of non-hierarchical underpinning to the welfare state in many Western European countries. And that is kind of embedded in social pedagogy, I suppose. It's not something that's imposed. So you'll often find, for example, in Germany, there's it's not all state-run provision. It's also provision run by faith organizations and charities and so on. And they have had a kind of, over a long period of time, a developed relationship about ways of doing things between the state and civil society that is more mutual, based on kind of mutual relationships rather than hierarchical. It's less, we'll commission you to do this and we tell you what to do. It's more about, what are your ideas about solving this problem and what are our ideas, and we come to some agreement. So I think there is a cultural difference there. There's also
is it more expensive?
Depends how you calculate it, but
generally speaking,
not really. When we looked at the wages in the residential care study, we looked at the wages in other countries and Britain. There wasn't that much difference. The wages are a massive part of the bill for running residential care. So it wasn't a huge difference. There is a difference in terms of education. So if you recruit people off the street who have been stacking shelves, you pay them at a lower rate. You don't pay their education. Whereas if you educate people to degree level, obviously that costs.
So just because, I mean, you talked at the beginning about, retaining staff and the trust, and then the child having somebody that they can trust, in the long term. So, well, in your conversations, trying to push this forward, you come up saying the qualities and the forms and the support that the practitioners need to do this. What is your pushback from the local councils or from the NHS?
I haven't had conversations with the NHS. So
who do you talk to? I mean, who do you actually push this forward with?
So via the local authorities and increasingly via commercial outfits, so who help services.
Yeah.
So what happened was in the late 2000s, there was a government policy to pilot social pedagogy in residential care, which we did. We recruited social pedagogues from other countries, and they were working in about 18 children's homes who'd applied for a social pedagogue. And then an evaluation was done, which found that the quality of children's lives was better, but it was quite hard to see at the end of the process whether there were formal outcomes that were different.
So they didn't tick the outcome box.
And then the government changed and there was a wholesale reduction in spending, and the ethos of the previous government went. So Every Child Matters was abandoned. That's the prime policy in England around children. And we went into a period where government was not really paying attention to improvement in residential care, for example.
Okay. So this is, without getting too much into politics, the Blair years, it was there, and then the austerity came in and it stopped.
Austerity came in, and then there was a view that the market will sort the problems out.
That
was.
And getting you, we're talking about sort of the outcomes, concrete examples, because your arguments are that care and education should not be separated.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there an example you can remember that best captures how somebody benefits from where care and education meet in the sort of overall care of a child or well-being?
This is a long time ago since I was in practice. So it's quite difficult for me to come up with specific examples of that specific children. Maybe Danny is better at doing that. But I can say that, in other studies that we've done, for example, looking at higher education and looking at European ways of getting kids in care into higher education, we can see that there are specific roles that have really helped that. So where we had a teacher working in a leaving care team in England, in one local authority, that meant that teacher was working alongside people, social workers, quite on a day-to-day basis. And that educative approach really boosted the number of children in care who went to university or further education from that local authority over quite a short period of time, because the care and education was happening right side by side. He would take that person, he would help them write their personal statements, he would take them to interviews, he would shepherd them through the process in a way that a parent of a middle-class child might do. And that is social pedagogy in essence. That is taking a really proactive, relational, joint approach to that particular young
So
person.
we've heard recently from one of your colleagues on this thing is that the system here, if you're a social worker, for example, you're not allowed to get that close to a family and do that sort of thing. We just heard that you couldn't even send them a birthday card or something like that. Is this right? And is what needs to be done?
So 2 points. Firstly, when I'm a social worker, that wasn't the case. When I was a social worker, it's not that you were going to be on a friendship basis, but I lived in the same part of town as my clients, and you would see them in the shops or on the street, and you would have a conversation with them. There wasn't that problem. The second point I would make is that social pedagogy has a concept called personal, private, and professional. The 3 Ps.
Okay.
And the 3 Ps works out at this. It's a kind of guide for professional practice, in a sense. So you have your professional knowledge, which is your theories and your procedures and your tools, I suppose. You have your personal knowledge, which is those parts of you that you're able to give in a relationship. It might be, I can see there's a guitar in Danny's screen. It might be that you play guitar and the child that you're talking to says, I've always liked music. And you might say, well, I like playing guitar. Would you like to learn to play guitar? Shall we do it together? And so that would be your personal knowledge. And then your private knowledge would be those parts of your personal life that you're going to keep to yourself. Mm-hmm. And that might be, where you live, or it might be, what you've got in your bank account. It might be, anything that you feel is only for your own sense. Mm-hmm. And, that is a kind of good guide for being a relational practitioner. There is that personal arena. You may need to reflect on what the boundaries.
These are clear lines that they're not.
But they are clear lines.
Blurring.
There is knowledge that you keep private. There's professional knowledge, and in the middle there's this personal knowledge, personal skills, personal attributes, which you are able to deploy in the ways of making a relationship. It might be, I love playing with Lego. Let's get down on the floor and make something out of Lego. Mm-hmm. It might be, so you can use yourself to develop that relationship. And the social pedagogues have a kind of ethos that they called Haltong. Mm-hmm. And it's the embodied sense of self that you have an idea of congruence between your values, your professional tools, the way that you are as a person, that you will deploy as a practitioner. And so you're not just following procedures, you're not just exercising tasks, you are a whole person, and you're bringing that whole person to a meeting, a relationship, an excursion with the children, planning for the day ahead, all of those things. When you might be, I don't know, at a team meeting thinking about what we're going to do for the holidays, what would the kids like to do? I like going climbing. Let's organize a climbing trip. What do we need to do in relation to that? Then the professional knowledge kicks in. What are the procedures that we have to follow in order to make that happen? What are the snags and barriers that come along the way? And how are we going to meet those?
This is a very different outline to the one that you described earlier, is the person that's stacking shelves at Tesco and goes and gets a job in a care home. Now, they're not going to be trained to a level. How far should they, or could they, in the current climate, be trained up to begin to understand some of those points?
Well, we developed a sort of training and learning framework years ago when we started with level 3, which is what level 3 is equivalent to A level. So if you think about what you would expect an 18-year-old to be able to do and be able to understand at A level, and you think, well, in other countries, the person who's at level 3, i.e. just finished high school, is not going to be employed in a residential care home. Because the work in a residential care home is complex. It's dealing with people who have been through a lot of trauma. They have a lot going on in their lives. The behavior is unpredictable. You also have to work with professionals, social workers and doctors and teachers and people who've got a professional qualification. So level 3 is the absolute minimum for understanding what keeps you safe in a workplace.
Okay.
In early childhood education, level 3 is a room leader. So they are the people looking after a room of babies or very young children. Yeah. So it's an absolute bare minimum in my view. So yeah, I mean, and then you would work up. So level 5, halfway through a degree level, then you would expect people to be able to deal with theories, to be able to understand the complexity of what's going on. Ideally, you'd want people to be able to travel up and be able to get degree level qualifications.
And this is for a shift worker. Is it this is for a sort of floor worker in a care home?
In our framework, what we thought would be best would be to have a graduate level supervisor. If we're going to make a transition from where we are now to something approximating what's happening in other countries, we should have a graduate level team leader role in residential care, basic grade workers who can train on the job from level 3 upwards. And then you should have the possibility for people who are in the work and want to specialize to take further qualifications.
I want to bring Danny Henderson in just a second, but before we go to Danny, because Danny's on the shop floor, he can tell us whether this is going to work or not. But you are the first professor in social pedagogy. How did that come about, and what do you do? What do you want to achieve in that role?
It came about because I was applying for a professorship, and you're asked what title you would like. And so I asked for it. And I asked for it because I was appointed to that role 2013, I think, after a period of maybe 14, 15 years of doing research on children's social care, residential care, foster care, care leavers, education of care leavers, and much of that was in other countries, comparing England with other countries. Okay. And we had done these demonstration programs here, evaluations. We could see that this was a set of theories that brought together, as we say, care, education, upbringing, that it was showing dividends in other countries.
And you teach this at UCL, do you?
Well, we started a master's in social pedagogy in 2009, I think. Mm-hmm. And it came, and again, another casualty of austerity. It was then deleted because we didn't have enough students. So what we've tried to do, we had a infrastructure development program to develop the Social Pedagogy Professional Association, to develop qualifications in social pedagogy, which were done. And so we try to teach it. We try to promote the teaching of it. We promoted the professional association across, it's now 4 or 5 countries.
Are you getting traction?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's I stepped down from being the chief exec of the SPA some years ago, and Robin Kemp took it over. And they have really worked hard at getting members and accredited members from courses. So
let me bring Danny Henderson in now from Care Visions itself, because Danny is in charge of these residential homes. So you use social pedagogy, Danny, or are you restricted from using it because of the system?
We definitely use social pedagogical concepts, and as an organisation, we've had a long-term interest in this. We were involved in some work just after the evaluation in England, around the TCRU study, and I had an interest in that before then, really. So I was involved in some training with an organisation called an
And
organisation.
you agree generally with Claire's concept, as you say, the 3 principles she mapped out and everything?
Yeah, I mean, the conceptually it can be mapped out, in different ways. But yeah, I love that. I think there's some real kind of value in finding ways of framing complexity to contain it, but so you can negotiate rather than sort of reduce it into sort of you really straightforward kind of reductive ways of working that actually look for direct outcomes. What it was once said to me that social pedagogy is social pedagogues are gardeners, not sculptors, and that sounds a bit free and simplistic, but actually that's fundamentally what we're trying to do here is create the conditions for development, create the conditions for nurturing the sense of belonging and helping young people find purpose and place in the wider world. So I think that is it sort of accepted when a child or a young person is going for a funding package? Claire, can you put social pedagogy in there as the system under which they will be looked after, or is that not yet accepted?
Well, I couldn't answer that because I'm not in that position, but I don't.
Danny, you'll answer it.
Danny could answer it better than me. I think there are some places in the country that explicitly bash themselves as social pedagogy. For example, the Pedagogy Lighthouse Trust or whatever it's called. They would say, yeah, this is a social pedagogic placement.
Okay.
But there are not so many of them, and I wish there were more. But there are the accreditation and the membership from SPA is helping to generate that sort of brand, as it were.
Yeah. So Danny, I know Scotland operates slightly differently, but can you say this child is having a social pedagogic package, as it were?
The short answer is no, and it's kind of, from my perspective, that's not just about kind of, like not being hesitant about the idea of social pedagogy. I think Claire's described it really, really clearly and does so, really, really well. But broadly speaking, this is quite a nebulous concept to the world of children's services. So it doesn't actually sort of describe anything that people might necessarily be familiar with. But also for me, there's something, and this speaks to, the conceptualization of social pedagogy and what it is and what it isn't, and actually can we really claim that? I think there's something about, knowing conceptually that they're trying to work in a social pedagogic way, but I think I feel too humble to be able to say that we can headline it in that respect, and there are some tensions within the system in that way as well.
Yeah.
So just to get back to the package, and maybe for both of you here, when a young person comes in and the package includes, swimming and some sort of lessons and outings and maybe a mobility vehicle or whatever it is, all of those are these silos, aren't they? These outcome tick boxes that we were talking about earlier. But it's not the holistic social pedagogy concept that we're discussing. Am I right on that, Claire?
If that's what's happening, I'm not in practice, so I'm not got direct experience of commissioning a care placement at the moment. So if it is the case that children are being given, a menu of activities and that they will be supplied at X time, and it's not bounded up with a consistent nurturing relationship, then I suspect it's not social pedagogic.
Is that the case, Danny?
Not for us. No, I think we've done lots to kind of to change the discourse nationally around kind of the importance of relationships and the role of relationships in young people's lives, particularly young people in care. Obviously, but there is something about Claire's described something that's a discipline, something that's deeply sort of humanitarian and sort of philosophically, and I think there is just something about making sure that if you're going to describe something as such, then you need to be able to underwrite that in practice, and given the issues that that there's the pathways to sort of professional practice in residential childcare, for example, they're still not kind of, particularly, I like the idea of structuring services around the graduate.
And the staff, because Claire described the sort of levels of training in that, are you able or can you afford to implement that type of structure that Claire spoke about?
I think there are a number of issues that go beyond training, but like in learning and development, one's not related to some structural issues, I suppose, within the sector and the sort of role of residential childcare or direct childcare practice, whether that's early years or residential childcare or even youth work, is that the status is relatively diminutive of those practitioners in comparison to our colleagues in education or in social work. And the terms and conditions, or the working conditions, can be quite kind of, antisocial, if you like, because you spend time with kids at night, and actually, it's also fantastically, it's life-changing. I think Claire's talked to that. I could definitely talk to that in terms of...
If I could just, because I asked Claire whether social pedagogy was more expensive, she said not really. Is that right in your view on the front line there?
Absolutely. I think social pedagogy is definitely about kind of, that idea of being holistic and sort of, attending to all the dimensions of what it means to be a person, what it means to be a child, it's difficult to measure. And what we measure matters, and we don't find ourselves able to measure that kind of stuff when we think about outcomes. But I would suggest that investing in this in terms of workforce education, in terms of sort of supporting the workforce after they're in post and development, around development, and ensuring that we have got the kind of resources to be able to sort of nurture children the way. That would save money, Humphrey. That's the point I'm making. In
the long term, because if the children come out better, they're not going to commit crimes and all the rest of it. Claire, so go on. Yeah.
Absolutely, I think it would save money in the long run. And what's important, just to build on what Danny was saying, is that it's about mindset. It's about knowledge and mindset, and the ability to work in teams and to think for oneself. It's having a because for what you're doing, to know what you're doing and why you're doing it when you're in practice. And far too often, if you just recruit people who have no training and they're young and you don't expect much of them, then they're just going to be relying on procedures and tasks. And if you do that, then young people are just not getting the relationships that they deserve to have. They're not getting the opportunities they deserve to have. And it's not surprising then that they don't, feel valued in a system, and they don't want to do well in themselves in a system. So, we've had young people contribute to our research to say being in residential care is like being in a war zone, and because it's chaos, and you're not going to get children to thrive and flourish and be the best version of themselves if the staffing structures, the organisational expectations, the profit motive, if all of that is working against their holistic development. So our system is not geared up for social pedagogy, and our adoption of it has got a long, long way to go.
Is there anything in our system in Britain that is better than the social pedagogy system in Europe, or is it all just behind the times?
You tend to come across good examples in Britain, and we've always had this ability to innovate and have pockets of really good stuff happening. For example, the Camp Hill Trust in Aberdeen has been running for decades, and it started with Kurt Hahn, and it had a German wartime origins, and it is embodying social pedagogy, and it has it's thrived all this time. But I'm afraid the the relationship with the state really needs to gear up and start looking at children's best interests.
Just very quickly, because we are running out of time. Danny, is there anything that Claire can do in her world of academia that would make your life towards social pedagogy easier?
I think Claire's done enough. I'm probably possibly not enough, but I think Claire's done a remarkable. I found Claire's work really inspiring and challenging, and I think there's definitely sort of contributed massively to improvements and a movement around social pedagogy, which it felt to me was in decline a wee bit. Post. Like after the research project that came about, certainly in Scotland, it felt like we were having this sort of, there was a tension between sort of treatment programs and reductive kind of, ways of looking after children that were trying to address problems directly vis-a-vis outcomes. I still think there's a lot of that within the system in Scotland and probably England, in the sense that you're seeing framing children as problematic. And actually, trying to directly address those problematic their behaviour is not going to get you any sort of sustainable, the kind of outcomes that are sustainable, but it might have short-term gains. But
that's what Claire was sort of saying at the beginning. But Claire, is there anything Danny and CareVisions can do to make your job easier, give it more traction?
I mean, we always want to do more research. So if you've got ideas of things that need to be doing, come and talk to me. I mean, Danny and CareVisions do a great job of keeping social pedagogy in the mix as we go forward. And I think more things like this. It's great to have a podcast that does this. Hopefully you'll get it out far and wide.
Yeah.
And I did a podcast earlier in the year for a completely different organisation, and all of these things really help. Making the links between what's happening in residential care and what's happening to children altogether is also really important. I think the child poverty issues that we have at the moment. I've got a student who's looking at social pedagogic approaches to addressing kids at risk of knife crime, and all of these things. We have a really successful journal, the International Journal of Social Pedagogy. All of these things really help to push the agenda forward.
It needs to, we hear a lot about knife crime, but I've never seen one sentence linking social pedagogy as a sort of solution to knife crime. Time's winged chariot is attacking us and we have to end. I want to thank you, Claire, for being such an inspiring, knowledgeable, compelling guest. But before I let you go, give us one last thought to take away, a water cooler conversation thought.
Well, I mean, it's about joining the dots, I think. There is so much going on. I was thinking about Len Sisay's Christmas dinners campaign for care leavers, opening up stations that are shut on Christmas Day to offer Christmas dinners. That's a great initiative. There is so much going on in little pockets, and I think it's incumbent on all of us to join the dots between ideas and practice, wherever they may be.
Join the dots between ideas and practice. I love it, because we have the ideas from Claire Cameron and the practice from Danny Henderson, but we are out of time. For any comments, questions and challenges to Dr. Claire Cameron or any of us at CareVisions, please get in touch. Professional talk at carevisions.co.uk or email Claire directly, c.cameron@ucl.ac.uk. That'll be all up on our website and everything. And until the next professional talk, to everyone, stay safe and goodbye. To hear more episodes, discover upcoming discussions, or access free tools and resources, scroll down to the episode description for all the links. And from me, Humphrey Hawksley, and all at CareVisions, stay safe and goodbye.